If you grew up in the 1970s, dessert wasn't something you bought. It was something your mother invented on a Thursday night out of whatever was still in the cupboard. A can of something, a box of something else, an egg if it had been a good week. And here's the strange part. Those desserts were incredible. Not fancy, not photogenic. Nobody was taking pictures of food back then anyway, but they were the kind of sweet that people still talk about 50 years later, usually with a little crack in their voice when they get to the part about their grandmother's kitchen. Most of them have quietly disappeared. Not because they stopped working, but because we stopped needing them, and somewhere along the way we decided that dessert had to come in a box with a ribbon on it. So today, we're bringing 8 of them back. And I'll warn you right now, the number 1 dessert on this list was made out of a potato. An actual boiled potato. Stay with me, because it is far better than it sounds. But before we get to the recipes, you need to understand what those kitchens were actually up against, because it explains everything about why these desserts look the way they do. The 70s were not a gentle decade for a grocery budget. There was an oil crisis in 1973 that pushed the price of everything upward, because everything has to be shipped. Food prices climbed at rates that would make a modern shopper physically ill. In 1974, the price of sugar spiked so violently that newspapers ran stories about people rationing it at home, and bakeries put up signs apologizing for their prices. There were beef boycotts. There were coupon envelopes on kitchen counters, thick with clippings, held shut by a rubber band. And in the middle of all that, mothers and grandmothers still put dessert on the table. Not because it was necessary, because it was the one part of the day that said, things are all right here. That's what these recipes really are. They're not frugal cooking. They're small acts of defiance made out of pantry staples. Let's start the countdown. Number 8. Watergate Salad. Let's begin with the one that isn't a salad at all. Pistachio pudding mix. A tub of Cool Whip. A can of crushed pineapple, poured in juice and all, because the juice was half the point. A handful of miniature marshmallows. And if there was money that month, chopped pecans folded through at the end. You stirred it in one bowl. You put it in the refrigerator. That was the entire recipe, maybe 15 cents a serving. It came out this alarming shade of green that no food should naturally be, and it showed up at every church potluck, every summer barbecue, every funeral reception from Ohio to Texas. There was always a version of it on the folding table with a serving spoon stuck straight up in the middle of it. Nobody fully agrees on where the name came from. Kraft was printing recipes like this in the mid-70s, right when instant pistachio pudding arrived, and the scandal was still fresh in everybody's mind. Some say a hotel invented it. Some say a home cook sent it to a newspaper. The story got repeated so many times that the truth dissolved into it. Call it whatever you want. Cool, sweet, a little tangy from the pineapple, with that soft chew from the marshmallows going slightly syrupy overnight. It fed 12 people out of 4 cheap ingredients and required no oven and no skill. That's not a joke recipe. That's engineering. Number 7. Graham cracker icebox cake. Here's a dessert that required no oven at all. And that mattered more than you might think. In a house without air conditioning in August, turning on the oven was a real decision. It meant the kitchen would be unbearable until 9 at night. It meant everybody would be short with each other. So, on the hottest weeks of the year, mothers simply stopped baking, and the icebox cake is what filled the gap. You whipped cream, or you beat up a box of instant pudding if cream was too dear that week, and you layered it with plain graham crackers in a dish. Cracker cream, all the way up. Then you covered it, put it in the refrigerator overnight, and walked away. And overnight, something close to magic happened. The crackers slowly drank up the moisture from the cream and turned soft. All the hard edges disappeared. By morning it sliced like a real layer cake, with dark, tender ribbons running through it, and nobody sitting at that table would have guessed it started as a sleeve of graham crackers and a bowl. Nabisco had been printing a version of this on their chocolate wafer boxes since long before the 70s, and it survived because it solved a real problem. No baking, no skill, 2 ingredients, and it tasted like something out of a bakery window. The only hard part was the waiting, and every child in the house knew exactly which shelf it was on. Number 6. Jell-O poke cake. This one is pure 1970s showmanship on a budget of almost nothing. You baked a plain white sheet cake. Box mix, obviously. Then, while it was still warm, you took the handle of a wooden spoon and poked holes all over the top. Dozens of them, in rows, right down through the cake. Then you mixed up Jell-O and poured it, still liquid, straight down into those holes. Back in the refrigerator it went. And when it set and you cut the first square out of the corner, there were stripes. Bright ribbons of red or orange or green running clean through the white cake, glossy and jewel-like against the crumb. Children lost their minds over it, and that was entirely the point. Think about what's actually happening there. A mother with $4 left for the week could put something on that table that looked engineered, looked deliberate, looked like it came from a bakery counter, and her children felt like they were being spoiled rotten. There is a real kind of love in that, and it cost about 90 cents. Number 5. Cherry Dump Cake. The name tells you everything you need to know. You dumped things in a pan. Canned cherry pie filling went in on the bottom, spread out flat. Then a dry yellow cake mix, straight out of the box, poured over the top. Not mixed, not stirred, not combined in any way, just a dry, powdery layer sitting on wet fruit. Then you took a stick of butter, sliced it into thin pats, and laid them across the surface like tiles. Then you put it in the oven and you did not touch it again. That was the rule, and every recipe card said so in capital letters, because the instinct to stir it is overwhelming. What came out 45 minutes later was a bubbling, crackling thing that was half cobbler and half cake, with a golden crust on top and hot fruit underneath, breaking through in dark red patches at the edges. Serve it warm with a scoop of vanilla melting into it, and there was not a bakery in the state that could beat it. 3 ingredients, 4 minutes of actual work, and the pan came back empty every single time. Number 4. Sugar cream pie. Now we're getting into what the old cookbooks actually called desperation pies. Pies you made when there was no fruit in the house. No apples, no berries, no peaches in the cellar, nothing. Sugar cream pie is cream, sugar, a little flour to thicken it, and fresh nutmeg grated across the top. That is the entire filling. You pour it into a crust and bake it until it barely sets, and it comes out somewhere between a custard and something closer to warm caramel that hasn't quite made up its mind. It's been the unofficial pie of Indiana for generations. Amish and Shaker families made it through long winters when the pantry was down to nothing but staples, and it stayed in farmhouse kitchens all the way through the 70s because those staples were always there. And I need to be honest with you about this one. A pie made out of essentially nothing is better than most pies made out of something. It is rich in a way that feels mathematically unfair. It tastes expensive. It tastes like it should have taken all day. It takes about 10 minutes to put together. Number 3. Water pie. If sugar cream pie was for a bad week, water pie was for a bad month. The filling is a cup and a half of water, sugar, flour, a splash of vanilla, a few pats of butter dropped across the top. You pour plain tap water into a pie shell, slide it into a hot oven, and then you hope. And it looks like a mistake going in. It looks like a mistake coming out. It sloshes, it jiggles. Anybody watching would tell you it has failed. Then it cools, and as it cools it sets into something with the texture of a soft custard tart, sweet and buttery, with a thin caramelized skin stretched across the top, where the butter and sugar found each other. This recipe came through the Depression and stayed in 70s farm kitchens because it worked when absolutely nothing else was left. When the milk was gone, when the eggs were being saved, when there was flour and sugar and a stick of butter, and that was the whole inventory. It is the most humble dessert I know of, and people who grew up eating it still get emotional talking about it, not because it was good, although it was, because somebody made it for them anyway. Number 2. Wacky Cake. No eggs, no milk, no butter, no mixing bowl. You dumped flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, and salt straight into the baking pan and stirred it around with a fork. Then you made 3 little wells in the dry mix with the back of a spoon. Vinegar in one, vanilla in another, oil in the third. Poured cold water over the whole thing, stirred until it just came together, and baked it right in that same pan. One dish, nothing to wash. No bowl, no beater, no creaming butter and sugar for 10 minutes with a hand mixer you didn't own. And here's the clever part. The vinegar reacts with the baking soda, and that reaction is what lifts the cake, which means this eggless, dairy-free, butter-free wartime chocolate cake comes out more moist and more tender than most cakes made with all three. It stays soft for days. It is still the first recipe I would hand to a nervous beginner. Every family had a different name for it. Wacky cake, crazy cake, depression cake, cockeyed cake. Same cake, same quiet brilliance, passed hand to hand through decades of women who never got credit for any of it. And number 1, potato candy. I told you we'd get here. You take one small boiled potato, plain, no salt, no butter, nothing on it. You mash it smooth in a bowl. Then you start adding powdered sugar, and something genuinely strange happens. The potato liquefies first. It goes soupy and thin, and this is the moment where everybody making it for the first time is convinced they've ruined it. Keep going. Keep adding sugar, because it thickens, and then it turns, and suddenly you're holding a smooth white dough that looks and handles exactly like fondant. You roll that dough out flat between 2 sheets of wax paper. You spread peanut butter across it, edge to edge. Then you roll it up like a jelly roll. Chill it until it's firm, and slice it into pinwheels. White spiral, brown spiral, white spiral. 1 potato and a bag of powdered sugar made pounds of candy. Pounds of it. For families where store-bought candy was strictly a Christmas thing that came in a stocking, this is how children got sweets in the middle of February. And it tastes like a peanut butter cup. There is no potato flavor. None. The potato is just structure, just starch and water doing a job, and it disappears completely into the sugar. So that's 8. Watergate salad, icebox cake, poke cake, dump cake, sugar cream pie, water pie, wacky cake, and potato candy. Not one of them takes real skill. Not one of them costs real money. Every single one of them came out of a kitchen where somebody was doing arithmetic in their head at the grocery store and decided that their family was going to have something sweet anyway. If you make one thing from this list, make the potato candy. And then come back and tell me in the comments whether your family had it and what you called it, because these recipes traveled by word of mouth and every region renamed them. I want to know how far yours went.